All right. All right, you guys. Alhamdulillah. So we are officially live. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
salam.
To those that are joining, please go ahead and give some salams. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Talib. Assalamu alaikum, Veronique. Assalamu alaikum, Farasha. Give your salams and please share the live. That's one of the best things you can do for the Dope Muslim Women podcast is share our content. So we definitely appreciate it. And brothers, you can take the moment to share as well. Assalamu alaikum, Dawood. We appreciate all of you guys. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Dope Muslim Women podcast season finale. Officially, we're here. All right, hope I don't get emotional. Assalamu alaikum, Bashira. Yeah, turn me down. All right, alhamdulillah. So welcome to the Dope Muslim Women podcast. This is officially our season finale. We, mashallah, had an intense season 2. I'm super humbled and grateful for all of you guys for being here. I'm sorry about the little bit of echo. If you guys can hear that, I apologize. I tried hard to fix it. But I won't be talking as much, alhamdulillah. So we'll be okay. This is Sabria Mills. This is your girl. This is your host. And I'm so humbled to be here for this very important episode. Assalamu alaikum. We are here for the journey to understanding, part 1. This is a 2-part episode. We are first approaching this discussion with our Muslim men, having an open, honest dialogue, and covering a lot of topics. So I'm going to humbly introduce our brothers, Assalamu alaikum, and then hand it off to Brother Khalil. So first and foremost, mashallah, we are welcomed and humbled to have back our co-host, our brother that helps represent the Dope Muslim Women podcast very well. Brother Khalil Ismail, I've introduced him many times, but for those that may be new to the podcast, Brother Khalil Ismail is known all around the world as an independent recording artist. He has the dopest music out there, mashallah. He's also just a creative. He's involved in so many different ventures and media. So he's someone that you can just simply Google and you'll find out a lot about him. Welcome back, Brother Khalil Ismail.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. All right, and I'm going to introduce our guests. Alhamdulillah. So first and foremost, right next to me, I have Brother Amir Kareem. He's joining us here today. He is a revert. He reverted to Islam in 2012. He is a teacher, a football coach. He resides in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah, y'all heard it. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hey, I'm not even from here, though.
Great, Brother Amir, I appreciate you. You're super great, bro. Thank you for being here. And then we have Brother Nasheed Jackson. He was here before. Everybody loved him. Alhamdulillah. He is the author of Her Justice. Part 2. If you guys haven't got the book, I told you guys it's my favorite book. So I've read it like 5 times. I don't know if I told you that, Nasheed, low key. If I like the book, I read it multiple times.
Mashallah.
Her Justice. But part 2 is coming out in November, inshallah. And he has other, things that he's working on that inshallah he'll release himself. Welcome to the show, Brother Nasheed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. And assalamu alaikum, we have another new brother here joining us, Brother Rais Mujahid. And
Perfect.
he is a Black Muslim activist. He's also a logistics manager, and he's been really involved in the Dope Muslim Women podcast and the dialogue, mashallah. I reached out to him several times because I really appreciated your feedback. So welcome to the show officially, Brother Rais.
Mashallah. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, alhamdulillah. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this discussion. Brother Khalil, I'm going to hand it off to you to kind of lead this discussion a bit with our brothers. So welcome, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, I can see all the comments, so just go right ahead. I'll be streaming them in shortly.
So first, I guess I want to ask, and since we're talking about the journey to understanding, actually I want to ask you, sister, only sister on here really is
can we anybody that's playing the Facebook feed, if you could just turn it all the way down. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Brother Khalil.
Okay, yeah. So where do you feel like there's a misunderstanding that you all have with us the most?
Wow, you're going right in, Khalil. Okay.
Right. And then we'll go to the
yeah.
You gotta sit up for that one.
I know. So I'm just like, I'm not gonna speak on necessarily behalf of myself. In the process of in this episode, I took in a lot of like dialogue from Muslim women. And we had a lot of conversations, and there seems to be this theme of trying to understand first and foremost how you guys communicate, and not necessarily, there's a lack of trust. So I think because there's a lack of trust from a lot of women, Black Muslim women in particular, there's a lot of things that get misunderstood. So for example, how you pursue women, how you sustain your relationships, how maybe you pursue multiple relationships. There seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about that. How manhood is defined these days, I think that's a little bit murky. You know, what the provider maintainer sort of role that we know that comes into the deen. I think a lot of women nowadays are often confused because they're getting so many multiple perspectives from our men of what that means and what that looks like. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Although we know it's clear in our deen, there still seems to be a lot of misconceptions in reference to how you guys sort of interpret that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of a starting place that I can think of, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more.
Okay. So I guess, I mean, in hearing that, a lot of it sounds like the misunderstanding when it comes to like how we're defining manhood. Like a lot of times we hear a real man is this, a real man is that, but there'll be a woman defining that. So I want to ask, any of you guys can answer. When you hear the term manhood, what does that mean to you? And any, whoever wants to chime in first, otherwise I'll shoot somebody.
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I'll jump in on this. I thought a lot about some of the stuff, the questions that were sent to us, and I knew that we were going to talk about this. And I come up with 5 words: faith, leadership, loyalty, responsibility, and accountability. I feel strongly that like those things right there, if you can't encompass those and have those about you, you need to really evaluate your mindset on what you believe manhood is.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Rashid?
Responsibility, man. Like, and when you ask for the question about where are we lacking, so to speak, where are we lacking, where men lacking at, and one of the things she said was trust. The trust is gone. I think one of the reasons why the trust is gone, because men are we're out of control. We're like we out of control. We can't control. We can't control our private parts. Right? We just that's all we want. And so when we look at women, that's all we see as them as sexual objects. When they're a lot more than that. So, and I feel that is causing them not to trust us more, because they know they have a lot more to offer, but we only see one thing. They're only looking at us. They don't look at us with respect anymore. We've lost respect. So I think manhood for me is establishing respect for yourself and also for those who you deal with.
Okay. It's good, right?
Yes. So just one of the things I've come to learn through studying philosophy is that what is the metric that we use to determine manhood and masculinity? And so oftentimes you'll hear me talk about virtue, like virtue. Virtue is moral excellence. And when we look at manhood, oftentimes, even when I hear men speak of manhood, it's not in the context of virtue. So as I listen to each one of you brothers speak, I hear you talk about virtues, trust, integrity, honor, dignity, right? All of these are virtues. And what has happened is, for whatever reason, society has moved away from virtue as a fundamental basis of.
I was in tune. What happened?
We lost him for a quick minute. That's okay. So I need to just, I'm sorry, I need to come in. So Brother Nasheed, you said something that, like I said, I have a quote up here where someone said sadness, right? When you said that, you know, you guys are collectively viewing women as objects of physical satisfaction.
Yeah.
Right.
Now this is not, this is not just inside the Deen of Islam. I'm saying just in general, period.
In general. So where does that come from? Would you say that that is something that is a bit more specific to the African American community as a basis that kind of maybe can be, you know, traced back to some of the trauma or some of the things we had to endure as a people? Or do you feel like that's just a collective whole of men?
Yeah, I think it's something that's put on us in the society through music, through television, through all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's just something that's put on us on a whole to keep us to keep us not focused on what's really important. You know what I mean?
No, I was just going to add to that. You know, lustfulness is in the nature of man, and so when the brother comes and says, his statement like that, I agree with that, because to the root, a man, has that in them. That's a difference than I think that man has, opposite from woman, is the lustful nature. Yeah, we each have our individual jinn that is next to us and will be in our ear all the time. And for a lot of men, lust is that jinn.
Okay. Khalil, what do you want to add a perspective?
Well, before I do want to, I know Rice is back and he was talking about virtue and he didn't get to finish. So I did want to let him finish what he was saying about virtue. And we can talk.
Okay. So I just wanted to point out that if we're not using metric to measure manhood, then I don't know if it's manhood we're talking about, and it's going to be a very base and primal reflection of manhood. So when you talk about lust, that's a primal aspect of masculinity. It's very primal. And if you don't contextualize it in virtue, then it's going to run amok and just be wild and damage communities and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to say, like, the metric of manhood has to be virtue. Does the person, are they honest? Are they trustworthy? Like when you talk about Prophet Muhammad, praise and peace be upon him, before revelation even came, right, he was already a man of very high integrity. And so sometimes I think that that's what's absent and that's what's missing, right? A fundamental basis or metric of how we're measuring manhood.
So it's listening to what you all are saying. One of the things I've been paying attention to a little bit more is how Allah Ta'ala frames the story of Fir'aun. And one of the ayahs, he talks about specifically about how when Fir'aun's strategy was to divide the people off into sects, and then also to destroy the men and leave the women, right? And I actually think that that's still happening, right? It's just not happening in the same way physically. Sometimes it is through like mass incarceration, but there are multiple ways. And I think what you guys are talking about, especially with this lack of virtue or the taking of virtue from us, and the way that they're taking the virtue from us, I think the primary way that they're taking the virtue from us, but not just taking the virtue from us, that we're allowing it to happen, is through our lack of discipline with sexuality and that type of thing. I mean, I don't know if I do think that it plays both with men and women.
Yeah.
And I do think women have a nature too, a very as they get older, where it can be just as much as the men, to be honest. It just manifests itself in different ways. But the question that I guess I have is there's a couple of things that I noticed in that, and I want Charles' opinion on it, is that I think we have a huger problem than we'd like to admit when it comes to basic things such as lowering our gaze. So, for example, lowering your gaze is like the light version, but let's be real. Like in the age of the phones, what's going on with all this, sexual and TV and pornography and stuff, and how is that playing into us? My brother talked about the jinn in us, right? Well, we know that sometimes when we disobey a law in certain things, that's how the opening to the jinn. So the question I have that I'm wondering, and I wonder y'all's opinion on it too, is that by not only them placing these things in front of us, but also us indulging in them, are we allowing the jinn in through these mediums, and that's weakening us discipline-wise, which is allowing us to kind of compromise our virtues, is what the brother talked about. So I want y'all's opinion.
And can I get just, if one brother can answer, because I have an audience question I'm going to bring in. So if one brother can answer this or comment on it.
I mean, I would say he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I would completely agree.
So is there a pornography, let's just keep it 100. Is there a pornography problem amongst Muslim men?
This is a pornography problem amongst men, like Nasheed said, amongst men in general.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's the best of the problems, because I think the worst problem is there's a fornication problem. Amongst men and women, to be quite honest. But the pornography problem is more with men. There's some with women, but that's more women. But I'm wondering if the gateway is the pornography, and then we end up in that space. That's kind of my wonder.
Okay. So I have a question. We're just going to get right into it, because I think this is just a big part of what women misunderstand, especially Muslim women. The question is, should a married brother who is fighting lust get a second wife to deter that and be halal? Help me understand this, if you agree or disagree.
I don't think so. I don't. I mean, if he's fighting lust, he's gonna fight lust with 2 wives. If he's fighting lust, he's gonna fight lust with 3 wives. Right. Like he really got to dig down in the prayer rug. Like, he got to really start learning Quran, like reciting Quran every day. Like that needs to be his thing. He has, what the brother said, a jinn with him who's enticing lust. Another wife is not going to help that. Like, I don't understand dudes who say that. I'm really feeling sexual all the time. I got to get another wife. It don't help, man. I'm telling you, another wife don't help that at all. If you feeling that, you're going to feel that even when you got 2 of them. What you need to do is curve that by praying more, by reciting Quran more.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And this is coming from a brother with 2 eyes.
So let me add. When lust is the problem, no matter what the context is, what you have a problem with is the lack of intimacy. It's a lack of intimacy that's involved. And that's why lust is the problem. That's why I say, when you take virtue out of what does that have to do with virtue? Taking another wife because you're lustful. It has nothing to do with virtue. And so that's what I said. Masculinity has to be measured by virtue. And when you ask a question like that, the question is, you are then driven by your lust. And that's why it doesn't matter. You could take 20 wives. It will never be enough, because what's absent in you is the inability to connect to any one of those individual women. You can't connect to them because there's a lack of intimacy. And I have to say, like last week, you guys did a show about Black Men Don't Cry. It was awesome. It was phenomenal. And one of the things Sister Khadijah pointed out was the trauma that Black men go through. And so when you talk about our lust, and she talked about how that trauma skews our reality. It skews how we see reality. And when you come out of these dysfunctional households and these broken families, right, the impact that's going to have on us when we're talking about mate selection, when we're talking about reproducing, all we're really going to do is reproduce trauma. And so when somebody uses lust as a guide for their decision making, it's an indication that that person has not taken the time to readjust themselves to a healthy identity that's based on intimacy. And so he's working from a very primal nature, seeking out opportunities. And we can't see each other as opportunities. We're trying to connect. And the lack of intimacy is going to facilitate all of that.
So let me ask you guys this. So, Khalil asked me, You know, what are some of the things that women are misunderstand about men? What do you guys think contribute to this misunderstanding? Where do you think it all goes wrong between us?
You know, I think. No, go ahead, bro.
Go ahead.
No, okay. I think it's we determine that with trust. You know, I think when I spoke with you the first time, sister, we talked about, you know, it's like in this day and age, men and women don't seem to even remotely have the ability to trust each other, or at least they go into interactions or, you know, whether it be meeting someone new or etc. with the thought of, you know, they already feel like they can't trust that person. And that's missing. That's missing from, you know, the overall understanding about how we move forward.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say it's our it's man fault, because once a man becomes a man, a woman falls in place. That's just how I see it. Like when a man is behaving like a man, every woman under him or in his presence treats him like a man, and he treats them like a woman. We as men really need to start controlling our money, controlling our sexual desires, taking care of our families, and all that. The trust will begin to open up. And of course, you know, women got things to do, but we're not. I can't say what y'all got to do. I'm talking about what we need to do as men.
Right.
Okay, let me just. I just want to give some statistical data here, and this is going to be very important. So often I post and I let people know that 83% of Black children will see their families dissolve by the age of 18, and 67% by the age of 2. 67% of Black children will see their families dissolve by the age of 2. So we have a very large contextual problem here, right? As families break down, I sometimes I get lost on how we don't understand. As families break down, our identities will suffer. Our identities will suffer. And you talking about not just your family breakdown, but every family around you is breaking down, right? So we're talking about multiple marriages. We're talking about children out of wedlock. Like, we're talking about a completely socially collapsed environment in which we're trying to be men. And marriage manufactures men. Marriage manufactures men. That is the context in which manhood is manufactured. So if all of our families are breaking down, and if none of our families are even being established to begin with, where are men supposed to come from? I mean, one of the guys I follow, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, he talks all the time about Black males being massively underdeveloped. And this doesn't get better over time, right? If boys are massively developed in the 3rd grade, by the time they get to the 8th grade, it's worse. So what happens when those boys become men in the society? Like, we have expectations of Black men that does not reflect the training and development that we gave them. We have not given them the proper development and training. And then we have this unrealistic expectation that they're somehow just supposed to become men. And that's not how manhood happens. And I'll just say real quick, there's a movie called 300. And there's a scene where the Spartans meet up with the Acadians. And the Acadians are like, you only sent 300 men. And Leonidas start asking his men, like, what do you do? He's like, I'm a plumber, or I'm a farmer. Like, these men were different things. And then Leonidas asked his men, Sparta, what is your profession? And they yelled out something. I'm saying Spartan men were specifically developed. And even in the other group, the other men were developed as well. If we are not cognizant of our family structures, we are not going to have men. We'll have a bunch of males running around saying, I'm a man, I'm a man. I mean, I hear this all the time. But when you measure it by their responsibility to their family and community, we are not living up, because us men and women, as Allah says in the Quran, we are not reproducing men and women. It takes men and women to reproduce men and women. And that is not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing.
Wow. SubhanAllah. I really appreciate that.
Really?
I really appreciate that. Khalil?
Man, it's, you know, he's got a point.
Yeah. The mic is dropped. Yeah. So, 1 second here. We have a quick question. Could you elaborate on how marriage manufactures men, just for clarification?
Okay. So a lot of times I hear people say he may not be a good spouse, but he's a good father. And for that part, I get lost. I get lost because I just throw this number out there. It may be off. 90% of your responsibility as a father is to teach your son how to be a husband. Is to teach your son how to be a father. And it is contextualized in marriage. Outside of marriage, any and everything goes. And that's what you see happening amongst us. So if we don't understand, like you can just look at all the data. Married men have better health. They make more money. They like just across the board, married men do better. And for some reason, I can't speak for every man. I know we have a context that's hostile towards men being husbands. But for Black men in general, there's almost no context in which being a husband is nurtured, is developed. And so when you talk about across every metric, married men do better, then only like 29% of marriage-age Black men are married. So what's happening? What's happening that the thing that offers us the best life, the best results, the best conclusions is not the thing that we're most invested in? And so if we're not telling our sons, you have to be a husband, you have to be a husband, then a father, you have to be a husband, then a father. That message, there's a book out there called Is Marriage for White People? Like that's just how far away marriage is from Black men. And so when I talk about marriage manufactures men, like a part of the responsibility of marriage is to teach your children how to be marriage. That's the manufacturing of manhood. Manufacturing of manhood outside of the context of marriage is not going to get us the results that we want.
I'd like to add on to that.
Please.
He is absolutely correct. I mean, I am twice divorced. I have a younger brother who has been married twice, once divorced. My mom's been divorced multiple times. My father's been divorced multiple times. And what I've realized over the experience of my last marriage is that when I was objectively looking at it, I've never had that in my life. I've never had a husband, you know, to see how a husband's supposed to be. My parents were divorced at a young age. You know, again, my mother was divorced multiple times. My father divorced multiple times. My uncle divorced. You know, I had wonderful men in my life, you know, but when it comes to seeing what a husband is and, you know, exactly what the brother's saying, it's dead on. It's dead on.
I want to ask a quick question. There is always a sister circle or bonding, but what about a brother circle support? How come you guys don't do that? Nasheed, do you want to come in?
I don't want nobody in my business, man. I mean, that's just the first thing come to mind. That's the first thing come to mind. But
thank you for keeping it real.
Yeah. Like, I agree. We need it. Like, we need it. I write about it in fantasy world, but like, we really need a brother circle. We really need a brother circle to help heal us. We feel like we don't need to be healed. We too macho. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna take care of it. I'm gonna deal with it. So we don't really talk about our issues and problems like women do. We don't do that.
Right.
But I think we're so damaged. Like, we really need to start talking to each other.
Can you say, so do you think, let me ask y'all, and I need real answers to this. Like, do you feel like, you say you don't want to buy in your business, but there's a reason why. Do you feel like you've been burnt by that? Like, you feel like you've been burnt by people being in your business? Is there jealousy? Is there competition? What's going on that's making you feel that way?
Not trusting people, not trusting people. Not trust. I don't
That's exactly what it boiled down to.
I don't know you like that.
Right.
I don't trust you like that. Especially would not be me being intimate with you. Not, you know what I'm saying? Like, to get that intimate with you. Now, I don't know you like that. I'm gonna handle my issue. I'm gonna handle it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's it.
Right. Right. I see you rocking back and forth like you really got to say about it. Go ahead, man.
I'm sorry. This is all great. So when you talk about the massive underdevelopment of Black men, understand we're starting from a point of virtue. And when I said when virtue is absent, then there's a way in which we have to posture. There's a way in which we have to posture, right? Because I've been married twice to Muslim women, and in both situations, there was some funny situations with brothers in the community regarding their relationship to my wives. And so I'm saying, like, these were men I prayed with. These were men that I stood shoulder to shoulder with, right? And the next thing you know, like, there's this involvement. And so I'm saying there's a level, like, we're not being honest. There's a level of hostility amongst us as men that we have with each other. And then you can't open up to people who will be hostile with you. And the hostility is a covert in nature. It's not an openly and outwardly hostility, right? So I'm saying, for me, I'm just telling you as my experience. I converted 20 years ago. I don't trust men. I don't. So every time when sisters talk about they don't trust men, I never get on sisters like, you don't, there's no reason you shouldn't trust men. I'm saying, like, no, man, these dudes are thirsty. They're always looking for the next opportunity. Like, these people who pray next to you will do this to you. And so when you talk about a brother circle, and in reality, the sister circle is just as hostile. But I think sisters need it more than men need it. Because for men, we can just decide to be on our own. Like, sisters can't do that. And what sisters do is they navigate and negotiate the hostility that they have. So one day they can be in one circle, and then the next day they can be in the next circle. And I'm saying all of this is toxic, and all of it comes from not having these family structures that protect us first. My identity, I say this all the time. Our brains develop in the context that give birth to us. Those contexts are hostile. There's a hostile nature between Black men and Black women that creates me. Now, my identity is developing in this hostile context. And so I become very adept at realizing when people are hostile. And sometimes I have Muslims, they'll tell me, like, you know, you got to forgive 70 times, or you got to do this. But the hostility has not left. Like, I can forgive anybody if the hostile environment is not there, but the hostility remains, and we don't address that. It's not addressed in our communities. These conflicts, our families fall apart. Nobody gets in there and try to, like, really figure out what's at the core of all of this. And so when you talk about a brother circle, like, man, I just have to say it. This stuff will escalate to where somebody will get killed. So instead of allowing that to happen, what brothers do is men do this in general, right? Even when they have hostile with their wives, they just start shutting down and backing out because they see things escalating. And when things escalate beyond their ability to control, like, I don't want to be in a physical altercation with a brother, with anybody, right? So I just back away. I've been unmosqued for years because every time I go into these mosque communities, I see these people don't know how to resolve conflict. Allah has given us the solution, right? We have the solution right in front of us, but the toxicity is so much that it's hard to get close to men. And that's why I never bash sisters when they say I have a problem trusting brothers. No, we all have a problem trusting brothers.
Oh, Allah. The rise. Thank you.
You all right? Hey, we need to give him a hug, man. Give him a hug, man.
Yeah, man. We appreciate that.
I'm glad you got that out. You needed to get that out.
I'm sorry, it was a lot.
But I appreciate that, and I appreciate both y'all's realness on that, because that's how we're going to dig out how to fix this. Because we need to hear what's really happening with us in order to be able to decide what the issues are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move us to a different direction. Okay. I want us to understand. I want you guys to just be brutally honest about some truths for us women. Okay. Now I want to just preface this. This is my disclaimer. Not all women believe this, but there are some women that have beliefs about the behavior of men. We want your honest opinion and feedback about it, especially as it relates to how you guys show up in our relationships. All right. So the first one is men have a hard time committing, especially to one woman. Anybody can take that.
No cheat.
not all dudes want a second wife. Like there's some guys out there who can be, and I know them, who can be committed to one woman. I mean, they already committed to one woman, but there are some guys out there who want to be. But to keep it real, nah, a lot of us, we can't be committed to one woman. It's hard for us to stay committed. I mean, and then when I say stay committed, I mean without, venturing and going and get another wife. Like a lot of us
You said that's hard.
Yeah, that's a test for a lot of us, for years. Like for us to be years in a relationship and not ask for another wife or go pursue another wife. It's going to be kind of difficult for a lot of us, I believe.
Amir, you want to say something?
Amir?
I this is another one that I thought a lot about. I personally think that most of us want that one, and I think that we have fear of maybe it failing or the expectations that come along with it. Do we have what the sister is looking for? I think there's a lot of things besides the lack of willingness for monogamy, excuse me. It has to do with fear of picking the wrong one. I mean, myself, I've been married twice. First time was before I came to Islam. The second time was to a non-Muslim woman. And, now I look at it from the mindset of, do I really want to go down that path again and make a mistake? There's a fear of expectation, and, there's a lot that's going through heads of, brothers when they're trying to figure out, where they want for the rest of their life. And a lot of us is like, right now, a woman might not be even in the equation, period, let alone, looking at having, multiple wives and things like that. I agree with the brother saying, it's going to be difficult for a lot. It's going to be difficult for a lot. Me personally, though, that's what I want. I'm willing and ready to go. I don't know about ready, but willing to give this, marriage thing a third try, because I believe in that covenant with Allah, and I know God wants us to marry. And so when people ask me, would you ever get married again? Why would you want to do that? Of course I would. Of course I would. But I don't know when and if that's going to happen anytime soon.
So there's a fear. There's a fear. Okay. All right. And brother, so I wanted to I shared this comment because I think it's kind of important that we address it before we move on. But he said, I want more in our communication that isn't the topic of polygyny and anger. And I have Yasmin, I can't wait till you come on tomorrow. But I agree with you, sis. This is just coming from me, and then I'll let the brothers chime in. But I will say, though, I think that when you have particular issues within our community that are barriers to us sort of being able to establish healthy relationships, and I'm not even talking about in an intimate manner, I'm talking about just a healthy relationship as a village and as a community, it has to be addressed, right? It has to be. It can't, because that's when you speak of trauma and when you talk about healing, you never can go around it, right? You never can okay, let's deal with something else. You always have to tackle it. We're not yet over it. It's a huge issue in our community. So I think, though, although I was one of those people when I had the podcast, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was like, I'm not talking about polygyny. I'm not doing it. Because I just felt like that's everybody wants to do that, and then everybody gets fired up and everybody argues and all of that, and it becomes this unproductive sort of cycle of dialogue. But it's like what I began to realize as I began to listen more as a woman, I began to see, wow, subhanAllah, like this one thing is actually a barrier for us being able to reach a higher state as women and as men. And so you can't quite go around it. And so that's just me as a woman speaking on it. But brothers, anybody chime into that? So I think that needs a little bit of light. This perspective needs a little bit of light. Anybody, any brother?
Can I add that? I think one of the issues why it's, and she links to polygyny with anger. And I actually think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are so many people who have kind of tried to suppress it and make it illegitimate, that we speak to it from a space of reaction and emotion as opposed to solution and being proactive. And only now, like now you're starting to see people like Nazir who's got this, who's got these programs. But like, as I spoke to you before, and the last time we did a podcast about polygyny, is that there were no resources. And that's interesting. Like anytime, here's my gauge on whether I know whether somebody actually wants something to work. You put the energy into being proactive about it, right? But the problem is when you don't do that, right? What happens is that if this is a thing that's being suppressed and it's something that's in the fitra, it's going to come out. It's going to it's going to come out, and it's going to come out in unhealthy ways because people are trying to suppress anything that you suppress that's natural, right? Anything, it doesn't matter what it is. It's not even about polygyny. Within the human condition, if you suppress it and you try to take it out of its place, there will be places where it springs out in an ugly way. And I think this is one of those cases. And so instead of looking at it from a space of this foreign, weird, illegitimate place where we look at it as Americans, a lot of the world, especially in, like, for example, Africa, we probably could learn from just normalizing the thing. And then the funny thing is you find more balance in the people who don't even want to do it. Like, because not everybody wants to do it, but as long as you suppress a thing, sometimes people are just going to do it from a rebellious state, just because because it's being fought like that. So it's one of the things that happens with the human condition, and polygyny just happens to be one of the ways that it manifests.
What I can say though, the conversation and the anger has changed over the years. Like it's not, you don't. Like when they used to, it was like people were getting angry and fighting, but for the past few years, it's been more of maybe I should try this, or it's more like questions. The conversation has changed over the years. I can't say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you done said something triggering, but we're gonna get back to that later. But what'd you say, Brother Raees?
I just want to say, like, this is one of the reasons I bring up in the introduction to logistics manager, right? This is what I do. As a logistics manager, I need all the data that is available, and then I need to learn how to move things from point A to point B to point C in a linear fashion. When you talk about polygyny, we can't be Muslims. We forget Muslims. We can't be people of the book. We can't be people of the book and talk about the integrity of our chastity, right? Our chastity is at stake here. Our chastity is on the table. And if you look at things logistically, polygyny has to be an option. There is no question about that. To what degree we can argue and debate about, but it has to be on the table because logistically, there's no way we're going to talk about chastity, right, and fidelity without acknowledging. Like I just said, like only 29% of married age Black men are married. Logistically, how does that work out? It's not like these guys are just chaste men and they're to themselves. Come on, man. We know better than that. And so when you talk about the numbers of Black men, right, that are viable Black men that have enough of the skills that they need to facilitate and direct and manage family structures, right? They have to manage family structures. Well, if you're talking about managed family structure, that pool gets really small. And so if we're talking about maintaining chastity, because that has to be a large part of this conversation. Because if we're not, then we're talking about infidelity, we're talking about adultery, we're talking about fornication. All of that has to be on the table if we don't have a structure by which we are going to put these men and women into. And just the numbers don't add up. Somebody is going to have to take another wife. That's just the reality. Now, how we do it, we can argue and debate that all day. It has to be done, though. It's not for me. I'm not the one for it. But obviously, there are some people out there who can manage that. I'm not one of those guys.
Okay, brother. So I'm gonna stop. If it's okay, I'm gonna stop us and move us along. So I don't want us to stay too parts on that. And Yasmin, I do see your comment, and we are gonna get to that. Okay. So I want to just talk about image when it comes to manhood. You know, is it true that Muslim men care a lot about their image, how they're perceived in the community? They'll go to great lengths to preserve this image. And things such as like how their wife is perceived and all of that, all these things really play a role into how men show up for their women. Is perception and how you're perceived by the wider community, or how men are perceived by other men, is it really important to you guys?
Nah.
No.
On the whole, I watch. I mean, Allah is in control. I know He's watching me. That's who I'm trying to please. You know what I mean? As long as I'm following the Sunnah the best I can, and knowing that Allah is always watching me, that's what's important to me. I mean, y'all know. I mean, some dudes do, I believe, but not me. I don't.
I mean, I think it goes right with what you were saying about the having the guys circle. You know, it's the same kind of premise for me. Like, you know, what someone's thoughts or perception of me, you know, if they're not my parent, not my wife, not my athletes that I coach, you know, I don't care. You know, I know what I'm doing. I know Allah know what I'm doing. And so when it comes down to that, and the same thing I think with perception of, you know, the woman in your life, your wife or whatever. I mean, if you want to be a keep it up with the Joneses type of person, then yeah, people are going to definitely worry about how they're perceived or how their wife is perceived and things like that. But, you know, I wouldn't, me personally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, all right. So I wanted to ask you this.
Can I add one thing? I want to add one thing.
I'm so sorry.
As a coach, I always tell players, you accept what you choose. So when it comes down to, you know, how you feel about how your wife is perceived in the community or whatever, you know, you accept what you choose. I feel strongly with that.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's talk about being providers. This is, you know, has changed. I know when I was growing up, it wasn't really, I didn't hear a lot of questions or, and I'm not that old, but I didn't hear a lot of questions or dispute about the idea of brothers being maintainers and providers of women. But nowadays, there's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of dispute. There's a lot of what I'm hearing from brothers about being 100% providers. Can you shed some light on this sort of this mindset shift and kind of where you guys stand on it?
Anybody?
You know,
Okay.
I think there's some people who kind of can struggle with that. You know, there are those brothers that I know that are like, you know, this is 2020. You know, she got a career, I got a career. What's wrong with the two of us? You know, sharing the growth of our marriage, being, you know, sharing the providing. And then there are going to be those who, you know, don't want their wife to work or et cetera, and completely will take on that provider role. You know, I think it depends.
Okay. Did you want to jump in?
So just one of the things, like when you talk about economics, right? Sometimes we talk about like, okay, if I'm going to provide 100%, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? Is it even possible? Like, we don't even ask, is it even possible? Does the context allow for that to be the case? What does it cost? What does it cost to have a family? What is the cost of having a family? Does the person I'm going to be in a relationship have the ability to pay that cost? Maybe they can only provide 30% or 40% or 50%, like whatever the percentage is. Like, there has to be a reality about what the stratification of economics is. What does it cost to be in the top 1%? Where do we rank? Like, am I a working class family? Are we a middle class family? Are we upper middle class family? Like, if you don't know where you are in the structure of the society, then you may be talking about doing things like, if you're a working class family, there's no way he's going to be able to provide for his family 100%. And people have to be honest about that, right? So that you may have to find somebody that is willing to accept the fact that she's going to have to bring something more to the table, rather than if you're upper middle class family, where, let's say like in the Midwest, if you are a single man and you bring in 75,000, you make enough to provide for your wife in a way where maybe she don't have to work. But what if you only make 35,000 in an economy that costs you 75,000? Right? Like, these are the kind of conversations that we need to have about where we are in reality, right? And at the bottom of this, at the bottom of this, I talked about this earlier, is the intimacy. Is there love in this relationship? Because if there's love in a relationship, both parties should be willing to do whatever is necessary to sustain that relationship. And that's based on each one of their capacity. So knowing where you are in the structure, like in your local city, you need to know, where do I rank? Am I working class? Am I middle class? Am I upper middle class? Because these kind of conversations, like I see a lot of working class people having conversations of a lifestyle that's like the rich and famous. Like, it's not real. It's not even real what you're talking about. So the first thing is knowing where you actually are. Now, the objective for me as a Muslim man, as a man of faith, right? Fundamentally, the idea is to get us to where my wife doesn't have to work, right? That should be the idea, where she doesn't have to work. But I have to know where I am realistically, so that any plans that we have, we're working from a fundamental place that's not magical. Like, we have these magical ideas, like the middle black family. Let's just talk about it. The middle black family has a net worth of $1,700. $1,700. That's 7 million black families with $1,700. Like, if the water heater goes out, we're stumped. And if we don't know that, and we have this idea that this man is supposed to be providing 100% care, it just may not be realistic. You have to choose. Like, if this is Khadijah did that, right? Khadijah saw a man she loved. She saw a man with integrity and virtue and said, okay, I'm going to do this. When she had other options, she had the option to find men that had wealth where she was, but she wanted a good man. And sometimes you have to make those kind of sacrifices if you understand that you're dealing with a good person. Once you're dealing with a good person, you guys should be able to work out whatever you need to work out financially to make that happen.
Okay, brother Rice, I need to come in on here. I have a comment. I thank you for your comment. If you make 35,000 and can read and write, you can make 80,000 in 6 months. This is why it's important to open up to your brothers. So this is a comment here. Now I would love another perspective, because you know, I think it's interesting. You're right. I think Khadijah did, you know, choose a man of virtue, not a man of means. But Prophet Muhammad SAW did work, and he provided. You know, she didn't necessarily provide right. for him, even though her status was higher, right? But he was a provider. Does somebody want to chime in on this provider piece before we move on? Our time.
Yeah.
Another perspective, just a different perspective, though. If you don't,
it's what I'm finding out, man, and this is not just, like I said, it's not just in the Muslim community, but men of these days are saying that they don't want to provide. They don't want to provide, or they don't even want to pay for dinner. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not even paying for dinner these days. I don't understand it. Like, these some different dudes. Like, the women who coming up, they really dealing with some different dudes. I mean, Allah says that we are providers, so that's what we should be. We should strive for that. And just like the brother say, man, if I'm in a relationship of love with somebody and I ain't got it this month, help me out. You know what I'm saying? Help me out. But your whole view should be you're a provider, not saying not coming off the rip saying, nah, you got to help me with this. You got to help me with this. Nah, I don't pay for dinner, man. Come on, man, don't do that, man. Pay for dinner, man. It's what, $50? That's it, man. Pay for dinner, dog.
And Sister Yasmin said, if the collective narrative is, if it can't be done, it's easier for brothers to believe that. And it's the narrative that is sort of out there that it can't, that being a 100% provider can't be done. And we know that's simply not true. Brother Khalil, did you want to chime in on this?
Oh, boy.
Because you look like you.
Okay. Okay. I'll just try to be short. So I agree with a lot of what Nasheed is saying specifically. You know, just that the problem is the mentality change. That's what I'm worried about. Like, yeah, like you're going to meet probably people when you're going to be in a situation where you might need some help. But I'm worried about the perspective change where now you go in thinking like, I'm not going to do it. And you count that as her bringing something to the table. Like that's what when a man now says bringing something to the table, he's talking about money.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a shift. That's a mindset shift. That's what I'm more worried about. Like different families, like sometimes you could start out rich and then the law can test you and take everything away, right?
Mm.
And so, you know, and in that case, because your mindset is such that I gotta go get it, you're gonna go back and try to come up and go get it. But if your mindset from the beginning was an entitlement thing, where it's kind of like you supposed to help me out anyway, then you don't have, and this kind of speaks to what I think Yasmin was saying, you don't even have the kind of motivation to ever get back there. You get comfortable with my difficulty is with being comfortable with being supported by a woman. I'm worried about that.
Right.
Worried about, like, you should never, as a man, like if you the way you measure, you know, my brother Rice likes to talk about measuring. Well, the way you measure whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you aren't at the point, if you're still at the point where she's supporting you, you're not where you need to be, and that's how your mindset should be. So you should go, so you can go get it. You know. Right. Now you can, if as long as you got, and the mindset should stay within the parameters of Islam. So we talk about contextualizing love. I think love. An Islamic marriage can only be contextualized. Even love and mercy can only be contextualized within the framework of Islam. Meaning, Allah has set certain suggestions and rules and rights, and what Allah and we should contextualize that everything Allah is saying as a suggestion is the best way for us to actually manifest love. So understand that if you are not in a space where you are optimal, and we're not going to live the ideal, we know that there's going to be something where we're falling short in. But if you feel like I'm going towards or moving towards the ideal that Allah set, then I think Allah will actually end up giving it to you because you want it. Mm. My biggest problem now is that so many people don't want it anymore. That's what I'm worried about. The fact that now people are coming in like they're applauding, like it's almost a good thing that I ain't providing. And I always like to go back to, it's not even just a Muslim thing. I always like to what Tupac said, even though I sell rocks, it feel good putting money in your mail.
Yeah.
Like, what he's saying is, I want to provide. Like that's in me. Like that's what I need to do, and it feels good when I do it. So I'm gonna go out and get it the way that I know how to get it, even if it's not legal. But the mentality is still more like, yo, that's what I get it.
Right.
Losing that's where I'm more worried about.
Okay, thank you, brothers. I appreciate that. So, okay, guys. So we're kind of coming towards the end of this, but I do want to ask an important question. What do you, brothers, and I need to hear from each and every one of you guys, what do you feel like you really want women to understand, or your Muslim woman to understand about you? Or what do you need from us? Anybody can start with that. Actually, Brother Nasheed, do you mind going first?
What do I want her to understand? What do I need? I need to understand that I'm constantly trying to get better for myself, for her, for our family. Like it's a constant thing every day. I'm trying to get it, like for real, regardless if that's money, regardless if that's, land for us, if that's me becoming a better Muslim, learning more Quran. I'm constantly trying to get better for us, and that's what I need for her. That's what I'm doing for us. What I need from her is just to understand that, be patient with me.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Thank you, Brother Nasheed. I'm gonna pop up to Brother Amir.
Okay. I would agree with a lot that the brother's saying. For me, I want her to know that every day is a day to learn and grow, in this deen together. Ultimately that's what I'm looking for when it comes to the sister that finally comes into my life. It's someone that, I can grow with, someone that I can be vulnerable with, someone that I can you know, truly learn her, learn Ardeen, learn to step together and, you know, wholly have that unity of what it is to be, you know, that one family of just the two of you, and make it a journey together. You know, if I feel like I'll know when I find that person when, you know, I get it, I feel it in my heart that they on a journey with me. And I think that that's just what we look for, and that's what we need them to understand is, you know, the loyalty and the things that we each have expectations of is that it's a two-way street. You know, I've found a lot of the things that sisters will hold me to, or brothers in general to, if we're holding them to the same standards, then I think we can have success. But when there's a difference between what is acceptable between on each side, then you run into the problems.
It sounds like you need understanding.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay, Brother Rais.
69 to 80% of divorces initiated by women. 69 to 80% of divorces initiated by women. I want us to understand that manhood is not an event. It's not like one day I'm not a man, and then the next day, boom, I'm a man. As Brother Nasheed points out, it is a development, and it is a lifetime development. You never stop growing into manhood. And when you talk about the massive underdevelopment of Black men, I mean, it's going to be a longer, more arduous task for us to do. And for many of us, we overcome that. And as a result, we become much better men than even the men in the general context. So what I require from our sisters is a little bit more patience with us in our development process, understanding where we come from. If you listen to last week's show and you understand the hurdles that Black boys have to overcome, when you look at your man, you have to look at him as that boy. Like, he is that boy. That's him. And whatever difficulties he's had, you have to show a degree of compassion and consideration. Now, I'm not saying stay in some toxic situation that's going to drag you down. What I'm suggesting is understanding that as we grow, there's a different level of analysis for our manhood, and it requires a different level of attention to be given to it. I am not the man I was at 20. I am not the man I was at 30. I'm 45. I understand things a lot clearer than I used to. And so what I asked our sisters to do is have a little bit more patience as we develop into our manhood and masculinity. Now, that also means that, men, you got to be moving. You got to be moving. You can't just stay still. You can't be the same man you was 10 years ago, because she's watching that. She's looking at that.
Right.
And and when you talk about trust, that's where her trust comes from. If she sees you moving, she can trust in your development.
My man.
But also, you have to have sisters that when you see a man moving, you can't smash him down. You can't smash him down. You have to have a loving attitude. Listen, Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her. That woman died broken, hungry, but she was certain of the manhood of Muhammad. And that's why he's our example. That when you are that man of virtue, that she can invest in you fully, and she can trust in you and know that even if we ain't got nothing to eat, I know this man will give his life for me. And so that's what I ask for: patience and understanding. Patience and understanding.
SubhanAllah. Thank you. Thank you for your passion, brother. Brother Khalil, I'm going to ask you to answer the question as well. Then I have a couple questions from the audience.
Okay. I would just say, even though it's counter, and it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but work on yourself. Work on yourself and your own flaws and your own maladies, and learn about yourself and your flaws. And the more you become honest with yourself, first come from the standpoint that you have flaws, that you're just a human, and that you need work, then you will have a better understanding and have a better way to empathize with the person who you're with. So, a lot of what society does today, and the way that you do that is you have to take stock of what you're ingesting. Like, if you are being informed by what a man is by the media, especially popular or mainstream, and that's not being counterbalanced with reality, such as learning what for example, the example in the prophets and the prophetic example and who real men were, then understand that you will ingest that stuff, and that will affect how you think men and how you frame men should be. So then what happens is that when you go around a man and he doesn't fit that thing that you are kind of imagining, sometimes you become so blind based on what you want the image to be that you're never actually looking at the real man, right? But part of that actually starts because you're never actually looking at yourself. So society wants women, and I'm just be real talk, society wants women to stay in victim mode. That's what society is. People in power can take advantage of of women in victim mode the most. They can take advantage of you because then they will use you to use your power against men, right? So understand what's happening right now. Right? What's happening right now is people are kind of co-opting and using the emotionality. It's not just women, it's also happening with men in different ways. When you are led by your emotions, you are at most right to be used. And the only way to stop that is to take stock of yourself. One thing that the brother said, and I agree with to an extent, is that if men do what they're supposed to do, women will submit. But only if the woman is healthy.
Right.
If she's not healthy, it doesn't matter what you do. No. And it's the same vice versa. A woman could serve, she could submit, she could do all the things that a man says. And if that man isn't healthy, and I speak to men mostly about this, but today we're talking about what women can do. Because I still say men are the leader, but we're talking about what women can do. If you aren't trying to get healthy, no one will be able to be satisfactory to you. You will never have peace, and you will never be able to be with somebody else in peace.
Wow.
So the first thing I would say actually is, and this is where Islam comes in, because when you start taking stock, you start actually doing things like having a relationship with the Quran, Allah starts showing you yourself, and then you like crap. And when you start realizing all the crap you have in yourself, then you start having some compassion for the crap in other human beings, because we all got crap. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would leave with.
Thank you so much. So a couple of questions before we wrap up. The first one, I chuckled at. I believe, Brother Rais, this may be directed towards you. I think you mentioned, needing understanding where the men are and the need to develop. I think someone asked, does this put women in the role of mothers? Does it put them that was the question. That was a question from a sister. And correct me if I'm wrong. Let me find it and put it up here.
They're nurturers. Women are nurturers.
Into more of a mother mode instead of being a wife.
So what you have to take out of it is the hierarchy, because this is an intimate relationship, right? It means that I am exposing aspects of myself to my wife that I would expose to nobody else. So she knows me at a degree to which she can see me in a way that nobody else can see me. And she can either nurture that about me, or she can use that against me. And I've seen both done. I've seen women use a man's vulnerability to smash him to pieces. And he walks around kind of like egocentric, but the reality is he's hurt. He's hurt. And so I'm not saying a mother, I'm saying one human being having compassion for the developmental process of another. Like, if there's something, I'll give you an example. Once we get virtue in a relationship, I'm virtuous and my wife is virtuous. Then there are other things that we are building upon in a relationship. And there may be some things that my wife requires of me that I have a degree of incompetency in. That means that I need time to learn how to provide that need to my wife. I need time to do that. So at first it's gonna feel a little corny when I do it. Like, I don't know, maybe I don't come from a family where they hug. So now I gotta hug my wife because she's a very affectionate woman. So if I gotta hug my wife, it may feel corny at first, but at some point it's gonna become so natural. And that's what I mean by the patience, right? To be able to know who he is, where he is in his development for the benefit of your relationship, and then how you need to respond to that. Because sometimes our mentality, and that's why I said manhood is not an event. Sometimes it's like just allowing the time and the space that a man, applies vice versa, right? There are things that men need to allow women time and space to provide. But that one sister said in the comment section, we just need to be more compassionate with each other. Like if that is your spouse, act like that's your spouse, not like that's some object that needs to perform at this level all of the time. That's not us. We're human beings. We have a range of skills and abilities. And sometimes they're going to be low skills, sometimes they're going to be high skills. And all of those things we have to factor in when we're in a relationship with each other, how much space and time. Sometimes it takes 6 months for somebody to learn a simple task. I train people on my job, very simple tasks. I tell people when they come in on my job, there's a 2 to 6 week learning curve. If I see you learning, even at the 6 weeks, I had a guy who took 2 months. He became my best loader. He became my best. So I'm saying there's a degree of compassion and concern that you have to have for the humanity of the other person. This has nothing to do with mothering them or fathering them. This is just a human relationship where people, we have to know, we come from these broken families. We're going to come ill-equipped in some area. There's going to be some area we're ill-equipped. Be patient and kind with each other.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Brother Rais. And we're like so out of time, but I have got this question is so heavy, I'm not even sure if we can tackle it. But how do we eradicate the historical enmity between African-American men and women? And I just need one brother, if you can shortly, concise, I don't know if you can, this sort of question. Brother Nasheed, do you want to chime in?
Now I'm gonna let Khalil take this one.
I'm gonna be very, very, very short, because I really, really actually believe this. Surrender your will 100% to your Lord, and make your Lord the mediator between your affairs. And if we focus on that, because why? You're putting too much pressure, both as male and woman, both of us. We're looking to the other to be the savior. Whether you realize that even when you are acting out and you're acting like, I don't need nobody, it's a reaction and a rebellion to your pain and placing it all on this flawed human being who will never be able to speak to everything that you need.
Wow.
Focus on surrendering your 100% of your will to your Lord, and you will take the pressure off of needing it from your man or your woman.
See?
Okay. All right. I would like to hear the brothers' take on the lack of maturity people bring into relationships that makes them unsuitable to grow with. So again, another pretty concise answer we're going to have to do as we wrap up. And I don't know if we spoke to this, the lack of maturity. I think Brother Rais kind of talked about that a lot.
I would say, again, you accept what you choose. You know, when it comes to lack of maturity in relationships, if you're accepting that, you're choosing that. So it comes down to, like, if a sister is feeling like the brother has a lack of maturity, communication needs to happen. It needs to be talked about. She can't expect him to figure it out without her bringing it up to him, you know, and it goes the other way. If the brother feel like there's some immaturity in the sister, they got to talk about it. Because if not, you're choosing it and you're accepting it, and it's going to end up how it ends up.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not dealing with it. I'm not in a relationship. No, I'm not dealing with it.
I just would caution. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Say it again.
You're not dealing with immaturity?
Yeah. I'm not dealing with immaturity in a relationship. We adults, man. I mean, and what I mean about immaturity, I'm talking about, like, you know, you spazzing out. You know, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you spazzing out, you throwing stuff around. Like, man, calm down, man. Like, we ain't got time for that. Calm down. Like, I'm not dealing with that in a relationship. And I don't think nobody should, because it's going to become violence. It's going to become abuse if it continues.
But I would say, there are more subtle forms of immaturity. Like, you know, you're right. You're talking about more confrontational immaturity.
Oh, okay.
What about more subtle forms of immaturity, such as, I'll give you an example, like bottom line is we're talking about the generational issues that we have, and one of the things that happens is conflict resolution, how to communicate, and how to actually speak to a person in a way that they understand, and vice versa. That's also a form of maturity. Like, for example, a lot of times people don't talk to each other because they don't know how, and a lot of times this has to do with the fact that they don't want to be rejected. You see what I'm saying? Or you know, or they don't want to feel as if they're embarrassed or humiliated. You know, and that even comes from a space of not understand, of not even realizing you haven't, for example, dealt with conflict in a healthy manner since you were a child. You want to, but you just don't know how.
How to,
right? Like, and I think a lot of that's also going on too. You know, so like, how can people speak to that?
I used to jump in.
Yes. I just want to say, I would caution us to be careful of defining someone else as immature. There is a point where if there's conflict or confrontation in a relationship, we may need to bring in a third party to see what's actually happening. Because I may think you're being immature, but you may be responding to something in me. Yes. It may be me you're responding to. And so without a third party there to evaluate what is actually happening in the relationship, sometimes the person who's calling the other person immature may be arrogant. That may be arrogant of you to call somebody else immature. And that's something that I would try my best to stay away from. And this is where we need, like, if you're talking about development, we need Muslims in the mental health field that can help us process a lot of this stuff that we're trying to do. Because sometimes we think we know the answers when we don't. And that's a problem when you come to the relationship thinking that you know what the problem is. You might not know what the problem is. And you may think that that person is immature, but they may be having a reasonable response to something you are doing.
I have to actually really reinforce that, because I'll give you an example. Like, let's say a woman who's coming out of, let's say, an emotionally abusive relationship with her dad. Like, and this happens a lot, where the dad actually, he's just very domineering, and even his voice, for example, he's had a really deep voice. And, you know, but when it comes to her, only accepts yes sir, no sir, and if she goes anywhere out of line, like, he intimidates her, you know, even sometimes maybe physically. So now she's in a relationship, right? Well, if the person she's in a relationship has a deep voice right off the bat, she's not going to communicate her needs at all, because it's going to trigger her to the point where she won't. And so what's going to happen is it's going to get to a point where at some point something's going to happen again, because when you're not able to communicate, you're still going to want what you want. And it's going to manifest itself in an unhealthy way. And this is what you're talking about, where it's really not a situation where she's trying to be that way. It's literally that she was trained that way, and she doesn't know how to get out of it. And you need that third party to bring it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And okay. But mashallah, tabarakallah, like, thank you so much, brothers. We can go on for hours, but we just can't, because I know here in Atlanta we're about to, approach Maghrib soon. I just really, mashallah, thank you guys for showing up and being honest. I know we wanted to get so much deeper, but we're so limited by time. Thank you. I'm just gonna really quickly just go around. If there are any final words, final points, I would just ask that you really concise it, just in the interest of time. But Brother Nasheed, any final points before we get up out of here?
Yeah, man. Let's start healing each other. Let's start talking to each other, man, for real. Find those dudes that you can trust, because I know there's a few of them. Can't trust all of them, but find those that you can trust and really start, dealing with your issues, or start talking about your issues, and maybe you can help them out. You know what I mean? That's what I would say.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Amir, final thoughts?
I would piggyback that. I would say, let's just focus on communication and understanding one another. One of the big points was, responding to the other person and being able to be cordial and have those conversations instead of being afraid of them. And, know that, what you accept is what you choose.
SubhanAllah. All right. And Brother Rais, final thoughts.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity here. And I also want to point out, and I'll always point this out, that our metric is virtue. And let's keep virtue at the forefront of all of our dialogues and conversations that we have with each other. And then that way there doesn't have to be this underlying hostility, that we understand that all of us are working towards better families, better communities, and being better people in general. And the metric for that is going to be virtue. I always say this, particularly for Muslims. Muhammad, present peace be upon him, he was a virtuous man before one ayat of the Quran was ever revealed. He was already a virtuous man. And that's the foundation and the fundamental basis of our religion. You can have a person who knows the religion very well, and I've met many of these people, and they don't have an ounce of virtue in them. They are corrupt, they are unjust, they will use the religion, they will twist it and turn it to try to manipulate and abuse you. There's no love in that. Love is an involuntary response to virtue if you are virtuous. Let's always put virtue first.
Alhamdulillah, tabarakallah. And Brother Khalil, thank you so much for being here as my co-host. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to add to what my brother just said and say that the way to get to virtue is to surrender to Allah and surrender your will and your desires to Allah. Because there was also on the opposite side, there was Umar, who wanted to murder the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ before he became Muslim. And Islam had such a profound effect on him. So even if you are out there and you have been out there doing all the crap in the world, and you have been really bad, honestly, Islam is the way to actually turn you around to get to that virtuous place. And it starts with actually deciding, first making a decision, right? That like you actually, Allah has a place for you. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. If you still breathe, Allah still has a place for you, right? And you can get to places. This Umar, you know, may Allah be pleased with him. You know, he had to deal with guilt for burying his child, right? But he became one of the greatest, most virtuous, most beautiful people ever in the history of mankind because he submitted. And he believed in the mercy of Allah and the idea that Allah could still redeem him.
Yes.
Right? So I don't, whoever's on here, whatever you've done, however bad you feel, Islam has a place for you. And the way that you come to that place is you give those desires to God and let Allah handle it. And it doesn't mean you're going to be able to turn it around tomorrow. You might spend the rest of your life turning it around. But as long as you're trying to turn it around, you have a chance to get to a place that you can never imagine. And that's what Umar, nobody could ever imagine that Umar would go from a person who wanted to murder the Prophet to one of the most popular people, Muslims in the history of mankind, known for his virtue.
SubhanAllah. Jazakallah khairan. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to end with this beautiful, beautiful dua. And I have a few announcements, so don't go anywhere. But thank you all for sharing your perspective and insights. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in our efforts to heal and build up our communities. Brothers, please begin forming these healing circles of brotherhood. We love you and we want healing for you. This is from a sister. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Brothers, I just wanted to honor you. I honor you as a Muslim woman. I wanted to just say I thank you so much for coming on here. I thank you for honoring me to have this dialogue with me and to have this dialogue with all of us as Muslim women. Just know at the core, we love, we honor, we respect you. We may not always show this. We may not always display this in the most beautiful of ways. That's always at the core of it, right? That's always at the core of it. And so I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, all of you. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair to all of you. And thank you, Brother Khalil, for co-hosting with me. I have a couple of announcements. The first one is I did want to announce the two winners. I did a little game for the season finale, subhanAllah. So the two winners of the trivia game for tonight for part one is Sister Zahra. I know she's here, so congratulations. And Sister Jamila, you're also here. Congratulations, and thank you for being like top dope Muslim woman podcast fans. Those were some difficult questions. I love you guys. I honor you guys, and I have a personal relationship with you. So thank you so much. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. I'll be in contact with you. The second announcement, subhanAllah, as you guys know, this is the season finale of season 2. I've had so much fun with you guys, but we are taking a bit of a hiatus. However, the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, or me, Sabria Mills, as I mentioned, I'll be collaborating with another platform, and that is The Measured Path, which is run and owned by Brother Khalil Ismail. So during the time that the Dope Muslim Woman podcast is on a season break, I will be joining the Measured Path with hosting the Super Heroine podcast with Brother Khalil Ismail, which is a podcast that is focusing on the amazing, heroic Muslim women here in this society that have overcome adversity and have used faith to overcome their adversity. So these are going to be really powerful episodes, really dynamic Muslim women from this society. Most of the women you all know. We ain't going to name drop just yet, but that's going to be coming very, very soon. So, and that will stream through the Dope Muslim Women podcast platform. So please look forward to that. Remember that we have a website, dopemuslimwoman.com, where you can show your support for all this content. It takes money to run this. It takes time, effort. So please show your support. Tomorrow, we are coming back with part 2 with our women. It's going to be just as interesting. The women were on the line watching, so I'm sure they're going to have some things to say. So inshallah, make sure you come back tomorrow, 7 p.m. for part 2 of The Journey to Understanding. To Barakallah Feek, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. I love all of you guys. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you to my dear brothers. Inshallah, hope you have a wonderful night. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Jazakallah.